turn to one of the senators right now who's been in the Senate chamber, the upper chamber, listening to these arguments over the last few days. He's Senator Michael Bennet of Colorado, also, of course, a candidate for the Democratic nomination for president. Senator Bennet, what are you taking away from today's presentation by the House managers?
Well, it was, thank you, Judy, very useful to hear the presentation about what constitutes a high crime and misdemeanor. Because it debunks one of President Trump's arguments, which is that if you're not charged with a crime, you can't be impeached. Today, we've been going through the House managers' debunking of the Russian propaganda that Ukraine interfered with our 2016 election, which every intelligence agency has said is false, which the FBI director has said is false, but which President Trump has been trying to keep alive for his own political interests. I think, Judy, overall, the House has made an incredibly compelling case that the president abused his power, then tried to cover it up, and has entered into the greatest cover-up that we've ever seen by a president of the United States. The stonewalling that's gone on that prevented the House from being able to get documents and witnesses beyond the ones that from those brave people that were willing to testify, and now a Senate procedure that's set up to cover up what the president did. And that is what is so discouraging to me. I mean, here we have a country based on laws, not men. We have journalists all over this country and politicians in this chamber that have the right to be able to see these documents and be able to see these witnesses. And Mitch McConnell and the Republicans so far have perpetrated a rule of engagement here that's not allowing us to see these documents until at the end of the trial, if ever. It is an attack on our democracy.
Well, Senator, as you know, two things. Number one, the Republicans are saying evidence, witnesses should have been part of the House process, that it's up to the Senate to make the decision based on what the House discovered in its findings. And second of all, well, answer that question first.
I'd answer that question by saying that the President of the United States unconstitutionally prevented the House of Representatives from getting those documents. He is engaged in a cover-up. That is why the House didn't have those documents and those witnesses. And even though the President was engaged in that cover-up, they have managed to put together a set of very damning allegations that President Trump has refused to answer, except by saying things that are completely false, like you can't be impeached for something that's not a crime, or by repeating again propaganda that the Russians are perpetrating to try to weaken our democracy. And now we have a case in the Senate where we can't even, when the Clinton impeachment was going on, we had 90,000 documents at this point for us to consider and for you to consider. We had witnesses for us to consider and for you to consider. None of that happened here because of the president's cover-up.
And, Senator, the other part of what I want to ask you has to do with, frankly, the political reality in the Senate. The majority in the Senate are Republicans, and the majority of them, based on what we're hearing, are saying, yes, it may have been a mistake for the president to ask the president of Ukraine to do this, but he didn't violate he didn't violate his oath. It wasn't an abuse of power. It was something that was directed at worries about corruption in Ukraine. They are saying they still don't see the clear evidence that this was an attempt to turn relations with a foreign power to his own personal political benefit.
Well, I think anybody watching this trial over the last 2 days, has seen clear evidence. And the fact that they can't see it must be a case of willful blindness. And I think two things based on what we're talking about here. I don't, even though, this issue about the House versus the Senate and all that might be an interesting political dodge, the reality is that anybody with any self-respect for our role as a Congress and the need for American journalists and the American people to know what happened here should be fighting to make sure that we overcome the president's completely ahistorical invocation of a privilege that nobody has ever invoked in the history of our country. We cannot allow this to happen.
Senator, do you have any indication that any of the Republican senators are inclined to support witnesses and ultimately to consider voting for removal?
Not yet, but the American people, I am telling you, Judy, do not know what this president has been accused of in this crime yet. They have not, it has not sunk in with them. I don't think people understand how unprecedented his stonewalling has been. And I think when they do figure this out, before or after this trial is finished, they are going to have there's going to be serious consequences for people who voted to help the president cover up his abuse of power.
Senator Michael Bennet of Colorado, as we said, a candidate for the nomination, for the Democratic nomination for president. Senator, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, and I'm very sorry to hear about Jim Lehrer.
Thank you, Senator.